Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be going over what is arguably the best Pokemon TCG format that I think a lot of people aren't really that familiar with either, and that is the cube format, the cube draft format. Cubing and drafting are, well, they're kind of like two different things, but in the Pokemon TCG community, at least in my experience, I've generally heard them used to refer to the same thing. And so that's what I will be doing during the video, and that's generally whenever I refer to these in other videos, what I mean in games such as, for example, Magic, it's quite different, or the one's like a broader term, but that's not the case here. So if you're not familiar with what drafting is, just the idea, it's kind of like you choose stuff from a set of bigger stuff, but not from everything, and then you can only use what you have. So within the Pokemon TCG, you get generally you get some packs, and you take cards from those packs, but you only take certain cards from those packs to then go ahead and build your deck. That means that these decks aren't necessarily super strong, and then you could do this with official Pokemon TCG packs. So you go ahead, you got your 10 card pack, toss out the energy, and then you get some cards, and then you'll be like, oh, this pack has a really good card. I'll take this one, and then I'm going to pass the other 9 cards. You usually do this in a group of, I think, 8's the normal, but certainly can be different sizes. And then you take the card you want, pass the rest of the person next to you. The person on the other side of you passes you their 9 remaining cards. You look at those, take one, and you keep doing that until each person would then have 10 cards from a variety of different packs, and then you can do this with a bunch of times, and I guess you end up passing the other way after the first pack. This leaves you with a certain number of cards. If you're doing this with official Pokemon TCG packs, though, there are some pretty big issues that arise, and this is something that isn't an issue with. I've done this in Magic some. I'm not really a big Magic player, but or at all, but I have done, I think, multiple drafts at this point. I'm not sure, but the way it works there is you can kind of just toss whatever you have into a deck, put some energies in, and you can play with it. In Pokemon, that's not the case. Obviously, looking at just say the newest set, Prismatic Evolutions. Actually, I'm gonna look at Surging Sparks because it's a regular set, but you could end up pulling this Rabsca. If you never see the Rellor, which you might not, then you can literally never play the Rabsca. It just can never get into play. And then also there's 10 different types. Obviously, 10 types is optimal. Subscribe. But yeah, it's a lot. There's 8 different energy types. Dragon Pokemon are like super awkward as well, though they're not like the most awkward thing, I guess. But the 10 different types or the 8 different types is a lot to work with, and so you'll end up with Pokemon of a wide variety of types. Let's ignore the stellar Pokemon here, but if you pull, say this Uxie, and maybe Nuesper and Zelf and some of those pieces, you need some psychic energies, then you end up pulling and wanting to use like this Rotom and this Tapu Koko for lightning energies, and you'll end up with a big array of different Pokemon. This means either one, you can literally just ignore the other types and only focus on like 2, maybe 3 is like the maximum you can be using, meaning that most of the cards you see aren't going to be cards that you can really take at all, or you can go ahead and try a lot of different things, and you're not going to end up using a lot of it, and that is part of the experience. But still, if you like actually can't at all use some of the cards you pull because the evolution lines or the type stuff, that is an issue, and this is something that is a bigger issue with just regular Pokemon packs, which are quite large and also generally don't contain actually that many interesting evolutions, also along with the basics. So you'll just not end up having very many cool cards. There's lots of filler and Pokemon sets. So people then make what's essentially their own sets, which are their cubes. This is this website, Cube Koga. It's a website that I use. I've been using it a bunch recently, and I don't think it's linked on my channel page, but it should be linked in the description or in the comments or something. But just cubekoga.net, and there are a bunch of cubes, and you can build your own cube. This is my personal cube. I actually own this IRL. Would I recommend you just copying it? No, I don't really know what I'm doing that well, but this is what I have, and we are going to talk about some of the issues, but also I need to talk about why I think it is very fun. It's a pretty casual thing, and I'll actually open this cube by Omnipoke. This is one that I've seen, and I think it's cool. I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but I've seen this list, and I've seen some videos on it. And the idea is that and I guess a quick thing about the way it works with a, I guess, a normal cube, you just have a few stage 2 lines and a few stage 1 lines, so you don't have all these random evolution lines, but you just have a set few as opposed to with the regular set where you have a lot of evolution lines. But then you also have a better distribution, more focus on the higher rarities than a regular set where most of the cards are just going to be commons and a few uncommons there, which are just random basics. But you are able to, every time you play with this, because there's 8 people, you can kind of say like, oh, these cards, maybe the evolution lines are being divvied up between the 8 people. So you're going to have a pretty different experience every time. Certainly for the first like 4 times, you'll probably have a really different deck. And then doing it over and over again, you can have a lot of replayability with the same cards. You can do that with regular TCG cards and just decks as well. But it is a really diverse experience from time to time as well. And it's also a time that it's a format that has different aspects of the Pokemon TCG. You have obviously the playing, but you also have deck building, which is a very real and very important part of the Pokemon TCG, which can sometimes get skipped over. Say just in standard, a lot of people just copy lists. Some people aren't that. I mean, I'm not that great at building lists, so if I want to play a deck of a unique idea, then I sometimes just go online and sometimes build my list. But then I'm obviously, playing a weaker deck, which puts you at some form of a disadvantage. But on top of that, you're also playing a deck that might not be built as well. So this does kind of put everyone on that base level of you need to, have deck building skills and also gameplay skills. The idea is then you play against maybe everyone. It's not necessarily always everyone, but it's not uncommon to play against everyone, or a good chunk of the people. And so it's pretty uncommon that you'll get like completely steamrolled and have a terrible time. I've done cubes with people who are brand new, maybe not brand new, but who certainly are not that familiar with the Pokemon TCG, and probably played like less than 10 times. And then the TCG, not cubing. And then I've done cubes with people who have done cubes a bunch as well. I haven't done a ton of cubes. There's certainly people who have done more, but I have done a few, and I've had a great time every time, and they've been very different experiences. So it is something that I think I would highly recommend. I mean, it's a really cool format, but there are some issues looking at this cube by OmniPoke. This cube costs like $3,000. This is not something that I assume the viewers, any singular viewer has all these cards. I mean, I guess OmniPoke, if you're watching, you have all these cards, but presumably no one else has these exact cards, so the idea isn't like there's a big list of cubes here you can go through, you can find things you like, but ultimately, yeah, you're not going to just copy someone else's cube, which is kind of cool, but also means that there's a lot of work going into building a cube. Also, there's this other cube. I bet some of you are familiar with it. I probably should have led with this. This is the Noah's Ark cube by Tricky Jim. There's recently a video made on this. The video is a cool watch. It doesn't really break down cubing that much, but this is a different cube than the OmniPro cube I showed. And that one I'd say is more traditional. This one isn't anything like absolutely crazy, but we do see a bunch of different Pokemon, and it does show off different things in the Pokemon TCG, but again, is very expensive here, and takes a lot of time to come up with. So there are a few things that you need to talk about in terms of making one. If you are trying to make a cube, there's a special rule. You can make up whatever rules you want, but one that I like is mutant evolution. This one is like a pretty common one. You can see that some are quote traditional cubes and some are mutant cubes. Mutant cubes have the, I guess, mutant rule, which says that your Pokemon, any basic grass Pokemon can evolve into any stage 1 grass Pokemon, into any stage 2 grass Pokemon. And I think this is actually something that I'd almost guarantee, like, that you should do if you're someone who's getting into this, because your collection probably isn't, that big. I mean, it might be big, but in terms of, like, do you have, I describe, say this as a pretty regular cube, do you have 4 different um, stage 1 like darkness Pokemon that are the same Pokemon, like 4 different Zoroarks, which is really a thing that you probably want different cards. And you have like 4 different Garchomps, and 4 different Crobats. And do you have this for every type? This one doesn't have a stage 2 metal or stage 2 darkness line, but you get the idea. You can do different things and you can kind of adapt to your collection. But I think mutant cubes are the best way to do that. And also, that means that the basic stage 1 and stage 2 Pokemon are all going to be more interesting than they would be if they're just random stage. So let's say I get two Chandelures here. I think Chandelure has some cool cards and is a cool stage two fire line. But then the Litwicks and Lampents are not going to be super interesting. There are some that are certainly somewhat interesting, but you can have more interesting Pokemon by doing different fire Pokemon. Now, these aren't necessarily the most interesting. If you have actual questions about the way I did certain things, you can ask. Though I am certainly no professional at this. I'm just I'm whatever. I'm someone who enjoys it. And then also this means that you have. I mean, you could do lots of different things. You can ask me reasons for the counts, and I do have reasons for pretty much all the counts for things. Though I certainly have played with it some and tweaked it, and I would like to add, for example, a full dragon line, and I don't have enough stuff for that. I did toss in a stage a full colorless line, but as you can see, this Pidgeot is not very good, and there are some cards here that aren't super interesting that I would like to change out as I grow my collection. You can also see the era of the cards. A lot of it's pretty much all expanded format. There are some that are older, but you can do whatever you want with whatever cards you have. Another issue outside of the fact that it's a bunch of cards and a bunch of money potentially. This is $165 apparently if I want to buy the whole thing, which actually is not like that much money for the amount of cards that this is. Like a top deck is I'll just say it's $100 and it's 60 cards. It could be $50. I think that's like I think $100 is a bunch of money to spend on just one Pokemon deck. But anyways, it's not like these cards aren't that expensive, but it is a lot of cards as well. So it will end up costing you theoretically if you just want to go out and craft a cube and then buy it. It's a good chunk of money, but it's not like it's definitely worth it, but these are also for cards that you just have lying around that aren't necessarily competitive level cards. Some of these are competitive level cards. I think um, I can't really like identify any right now that are like definitely competitive level cards though. Some of them were like this Galarian Zigzagoon. Zoroark is not the best card, but it was a competitive level card. And a few of these were, but there are a lot of like fun little cards that are just from different things, and you can celebrate the way that you play the Pokemon TCG by doing different things. I'm gonna do one that's actually custom cards. I mentioned this in my Discord server, but I'm gonna be doing one a Mutant Evolution Cube. I might do it this weekend. We'll see. But that's obviously a very different experience than playing with a bunch of older cards or a bunch of newer, higher power cards. Um, you do need to keep in mind the power level. The power level thing, like you can see that in Cube Koga, all these have a power level. There is no really standardization about power level. Like this is high power. This, if you took a deck from this cube and played against standard, you would get completely obliterated. If you played against it standard from 10 years ago, you still get completely obliterated. Probably from any time period, you'd probably get obliterated. And of course, there are more powerful decks than standard decks. I mean, if you're playing expanded, the decks are better. So there isn't really a standardization. High power is not the highest. I think there's ultra high, but I think it's the second highest. And there are certainly way more powerful things than this. So if someone just says like high power, mid power, low power, there's like some level of standardization. But there are certainly I think some of it's a little outdated, is honestly what I would say, as these cards used to be like really good, um, I guess, but they're not the best. There are certainly cards newer than this that are like substantially stronger. I will say, like for example, the Torterra in standard, which is like not an insane card in standard, but it is a card with lots of HP and lots of damage and would probably overpower a lot of cards. If you're looking at kind of the cards that could be cool, you could look at GLC. GLC is a format that has a different, set of cards in the metagame that I think can be more interesting for something like this. So honestly, I think if you just took a bunch of GLC decks, tossed them together, shuffled them up. Also, don't do this with basic energy. Is my recommendation. You can if you really want, and it will create a different experience. It might create a really fun experience, or not. It'll probably create a bad experience. I haven't really heard too much about it, but people don't do that, so I'll just say that. Generally, you have access to as much basic energy as you want afterwards, which you'll just have on the side. Um, but cubing is something that I think is really fun. It's something that's like not super doable online. I'm going to be doing it online, as I said, and I'm going to be using Tabletop Simulator. Tabletop Simulator is kind of clunky. There is a way to do it using Google Sheets that isn't the best. I have seen OmniPoke's video on cubing. That's big, like it's part of how I got into it. And they used the Google Sheets thing on Cube Koga. I think it's under content. Yeah, you can look at this. It doesn't really work. Like it kind of works, but only kind of works. It somewhat semi consistently crashes. Also, there is a guide to Cube. It might be this video that is pretty good by OmniPoke. It might not be. Unfortunately, there's a bad video by Cube about Cube by OmniPoke. It just doesn't have the highest quality. There was one of higher quality though. I think like my videos they're okay quality. There's an older OmniPoke video, unfortunately, that is lower quality, but there is one that is better. So if you look at one and you're like, wow, this video it seems like um, not what I'm looking for, then there's another one that you probably are. So I'll try to link that down below as well. But overall, cubing is a format that I would recommend that you check out. Also, if you down below in the comments know a way to play it that is cool and that works well, I'd appreciate that. As I said, there is the Google Sheets way. It doesn't work super well as it like crashes a lot and like gets errors. And then there's also Untap. I tried Untap. That also didn't work. I think it has to do with the way, so a lot of these cube drafting things are meant to work with Magic. As I said, it like works better. I mentioned some of the issues with Pokemon. I think Magic just doesn't have them and has less types and doesn't have evolution. Um, so it's really common there, and due to the way that like Magic cards work versus Pokemon cards work, it ended up like changing all the cards or something weird. Um, so, anyways, Untap didn't quite work as well. I've tried that. I am trying Tabletop Simulator, which I think will work okay, but it is clunky and not free as well. Tabletop Simulator is not free, which is a little bit unfortunate, but yeah, there's some really cool cubes here if you want to check them out. I will have mine linked down below in the description, which I think is like solid. I think if you want to use this as a template, you could have a good time with it. I personally like lots of supporters, I will say that. Um, and so that might be not so fun. There were definitely some cards here that I would cut. Like Gordy's not that cool. There are some cards that are really cool. Also, I do have like a few Gust cards, which is one thing that you might want to be careful of. But if you have actual questions, feel free to ask me in the comments, and I'd love to respond to them about actual cards, why they're in there or why they're not in there. Obviously, I might just not have them or might not have replacements to the cards, but generally there is, intention. Okay, I don't have really many stage 2 metal Pokemon decided to double up in this magazine. You can have rules, you can make stuff up as you go. You can kind of do whatever you want. One like common, like in this Omnipoke Cube, for example, Radiant is dropped from the name of this card, so it's just treated like a regular Venusaur. There might be some ruling changes, so you can do lots of things that way. But anyways, I'd highly recommend you try this out. It does have issues. I think there's the cost and there's the people. You do need a bunch of people for this, which is why looking to do it online might be better for a lot of people. But getting together friends, even if they're not super invested in Pokemon, I think is still a very enjoyable experience for people. Assuming they're like willing to try. And you need to enter this with a it's not super serious, right? Don't treat it super competitively. If you do that, then it's not as fun. But if you can treat it as something that's fun and silly, and you can do lots of different things and try different things out, then it can be a really cool time for everyone. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell. Definitely checking out the links in the description. But I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.